Hello friends, what's happening? It's Crim and welcome to today's video where I want to take a closer look at the Shadowlands legendary power system. We'll go over how to obtain these legendaries and then have a look at how the rogue ones compare to one another. But let's start off with how to get these legendary items. After you have joined a covenant, you will start progressing through the covenant campaign, which will soon lead you to Torghast, the Tower of the Damned. There you will then find out about a mysterious creature called the Rune Carver, which is the mysterious gentleman on your screen. Now this Rune Carver has the ability to imbue pieces of armor with those legendary powers. There's just one small problem: he's forgot literally everything. And this is where we come in. The memories of the Rune Carver and their associated legendary powers drop from a variety of content like raid bosses, world bosses, dungeon bosses. Some are gated behind reputation, etc. I'll leave a link to a Wowhead article in the description that has got some more details on where all of these come from. Next step is to find a piece of armor that is worthy of being worked on by the Rune Carver. Now, since rogues are mostly a leather class, a lot of these pieces come from leather workers, with the exception of the cape, which comes from tailorers, and the necklaces and rings, which come from jewel crafters. Now these pieces come in 4 different ranks, starting off at rank 1, which makes sense. And the more a leather worker, for example, crafts this rank 1 piece, the quicker he will rank up to rank 4, which is the max rank. Now these pieces you can either craft yourself if you are a leather worker, but they can also be bought and sold on the auction house. Now once you are armed with this legendary power memory and a piece of gear, we then return to the Rune Carver, who will let us craft a legendary item. First of all, you can select a piece of armor that you have. Most legendary powers are limited to certain slots. After you have selected the piece of armor, you can then make a selection from a certain amount of legendary powers, and after that you will also be able to pick stats. Now these missives with stats on will be made by players with the inscription profession, so professions are really back in the picture this expansion. The final step to completing a legendary is Soul Ash. This is a new currency that is rewarded from doing Torghast runs. To make a base level 1 legendary, you require 100 Soul Ash, which is incidentally also the max you can get in 1 week from Torghast. You are either able to have a couple of level 1 legendaries by the time the raid comes out, or you can also save up and try to level up one specific one. After you then press create, you get a cool little cutscene, which is currently still a work in progress. And at the end of it, hey presto, you are now the proud owner of a brand new legendary. So let's now have a look at the rogue specific legendaries and how they all compare. To rate these legendaries, I've come prepared with this lovely tier list that you have on the screen right now, in which I will sort the legendary powers accordingly. If you're ever unsure what a legendary power did exactly, I'll make sure to have the tooltip right there next to me whenever I talk about them. Keep in mind that this is all based on my own opinion, and we are still in the beta, so this may change by the time Shadowlands is actually released. I'll make sure to keep you guys up to date as always, and if you don't want to miss any of that, make sure to hit subscribe, and thank you for the support. Now the rating of these legendaries is based on their sheer DPS numbers, but also their usefulness in a variety of situations. Let's start us off by having a look at the neutral rogue legendary powers, and the first of those is Essence of Bloodfang. This gives your combo point generating abilities a chance to put a short bleed on your target, which also heals you for a small amount. Unfortunately, at the moment it is kind of underwhelming, especially when compared to other available legendaries, and it's therefore going to go into the C tier. The next neutral power is Mark of the Master Assassin, and for 5 seconds after breaking stealth, this power gives you 100% crit. If that sounds really strong, it's because it is really strong. It's very good for all 3 specs in both single target and AoE, and gains even more value when combined with the Night Fae Covenant ability Sepsis. Mythic Plus, it's also very powerful because of the sheer amount of re-stealths you can get, and this power will therefore be our first entry into the S tier. The third legendary neutral power is Tiny Toxic Blades. This makes it so that your new Shiv ability spreads your poisons and bleeds onto a secondary target. This is only really useful for Assassination, which relies a lot on poisons and bleeds, but it also requires your shift to be off cooldown when the secondary target is introduced, and a lot of the time it is probably easier to just dot the target up yourself. One redeeming factor for this particular power could be if it spread Sepsis, which is the dot associated with the Night Fae Covenant ability, but it currently does not. And because it is so extremely niche, I'm going to put it into the D tier. The last but by no means least neutral legendary power is Invigorating Shadow Dust, and this reduces the cooldown of your abilities by 15 seconds whenever you use Vanish. It is relatively powerful for all 3 rogue specs, but I think especially in PvP will be strong. Think for example using a kidney into Vanish into another kidney. But even in AoE and single target in PvE is going to be alright, so I'm going to put it into the B tier. Next up are the Assassination Legendaries, and the first of those is Dashing Scoundrel. This increases the crit chance of your poisons by 30% and also makes your poison crits refund 2 energy. Not only does this deal decent damage, it also helps a bit with the energy regen issues that Assassination has, and it is by far the strongest Assassination Legendary at the moment. It is therefore going to go into the S tier nice and snug along Mark of the Master Assassin. The next Assassination power is Doomblade. This gives your Mutilate an additional 20% damage dealt as a bleed effect over the next 8 seconds, and furthermore also increases the damage of your Envenom by 5% for each bleed that you have active on the target, so it has some nice synergy with itself as well. It's not super powerful, but it's also not super bad, so I'm going to put it into the B tier. The third legendary is Duskwalker's Patch. For every 65 energy you spend with this legendary, the cooldown of your Vendetta is reduced by 1 second. Now as Assassination, you honestly want to try and line up your Vanish and Vendetta most of the time because how powerful you are coming out of Vanish and because of how Vendetta amps that extra damage. Reducing the cooldown randomly with this makes the rotation very erratic and is honestly really bad, and is therefore going to go into the D tier. The last Assassination Legendary is Zoldic's Insignia. This makes your poisons and bleeds deal an additional 30% damage on targets under 30% HP. This is extremely powerful on single target and also in Mythic Plus, and it will help a lot in especially progression rating. I'm going to put it into the A tier because it is very strong and very useful. Next up are the Outlaw Legendaries, and the first of those is Celerity. Whenever your Slice and Dice is active, this has a chance of proccing 4 seconds worth of Adrenaline Rush. Not only that, it also increases the damage you deal by 15% while under the effects of Adrenaline Rush. This is a very strong legendary, but it is kind of difficult to play around, and I'm therefore going to put it into the A tier. The next Outlaw legendary is Concealed Blunderbuss. Whenever your Sinister Strike strikes an additional time, this has a 33% chance of making your next pistol shot proc an additional 3 times. Now you gain combo points for all of those extra pistol shots, but only the first one is affected by Quick Draw. The damage is kind of underwhelming, and from my testing, the proc chance also seemed extremely random. For example, you'd have nothing for 40 seconds and then get like 3 procs in a row. I'm therefore going to put it into the C tier. The next Outlaw legendary is Guile Charm, and whenever you use Sinister Strike, this gradually increases your damage in 10% increments, going up to 30%. When you hit 30%, it will stay at that for 15 seconds, and after that the whole thing will start from the beginning. There are a lot of conduits and talents that increase the extra Sinister Strike chance in Shadowlands, so this legendary is extremely strong. It is quite predictable to play around and is therefore going to go into the S tier. And the last Outlaw legendary is called Greenskin's Wickers. This effect is similar to the Deadshot Azerite trait that we have in BFA, and whenever you use Between the Eyes, this has a 20% chance per combo point to increase the damage of your next pistol shot by 200%. Currently, the cooldown on Between the Eyes has been increased in Shadowlands, and the damage of this is kind of underwhelming. So it's going to go alongside Concealed Blunderbuss into the C tier. Next up are the Subtlety Legendaries, and the first of those is Akari's Soul Fragment, everyone's favorite legendary that unfortunately recently got nerfed. Whenever you use Shadow Strike or Cheap Shot with this legendary power equipped, you will do another free Shadow Strike 2 seconds later at 50% effectiveness. Even despite the nerf, this is still super strong in single target and even pretty reasonable in AoE. It is versatile and I'm going to put it into the S tier for Subtlety. The next sub-legendary is Deathly Shadows, and whenever you use Vanish, this increases your damage by 15% for 10 seconds. It is kind of underwhelming, but it does work for all 3 rogue specs, plus it has good synergy with the Nightfake Covenant ability Sepsis. I'm therefore going to put it into the B tier. The third Subtlety legendary power is called Finality. Whenever you use Eviscerate, Rupture or Shadow Vault, this increases the damage of your next use of that same finishing move by 20%. This is very versatile, works great in AoE, cleave with not a whole lot of targets, cleave with a lot of targets and also single target. I'm therefore going to put it into the A tier because of how versatile and powerful it is. And the very last legendary power is Subtlety's The Rotten. After you use Symbols of Death, your Shadow Strike and or Backstab will generate an additional 4 combo points. This is kind of a boring power, but it is reasonably strong and I'm going to put it into the B tier. And with that, you now have my final thoughts on the ranking of the rogue legendary powers. Keep in mind, as I said before, that this is still subject to tuning and is just based on my personal opinion. If you agree or disagree, or have any questions or comments, make sure to leave them down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe if you have been enjoying the content. You can always come chat to me on my stream as well at twitch.tv/crimwow. Thank you guys once again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.